Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of the Atheist Experience Live. I'm Matt Dillahunty. Joining me this week, Don Baker. How you doing?
Good. Good to be here.
Good. It's hot in the studio. It's hot in Texas, but you know, don't worry about that global warming thing or anything.
Maybe we should pray for rain.
The climate change. Yes, pray for rain like we've done here in Texas and in Oklahoma. August 6th might be a good day to pray for it in Houston, but we'll maybe talk more about that later on. This is a live call-in program sponsored by the Atheist Community of Austin, a nonprofit educational organization promoting positive atheism and the separation of church and state. We'll have the telephone number for you shortly. If you don't get through on the telephone today or you don't want to, you can email tv@atheist-community.org. That goes to myself, the co-host, most of the people behind the scenes. Also, if you're on the line right now and you're not the special guest, you can go ahead and hang up, because we're not going to get to you guys for at least a half an hour. And we're trying to make sure that our special guest actually gets through on the phone lines. So we're clearing that up at the moment. In addition to this program, the ACA also sponsors a weekly, maybe sometimes bi-weekly internet audio podcast called The Nonprofits. For more information, go to nonprofitsradio.com. That's PROPAGTS. And we were live yesterday. We will not be live next Saturday because I will be in Tulsa, Oklahoma at the Oklahoma Free Thought Convention, which is Free OK. And I'll be up there with Aaron Ra and the Thinking Atheist and a bunch of other people as well. Looking forward to that. Any atheist or atheist-friendly person is welcome to come to any of our events. You don't have to be a member to attend. And after we're done with the show, we get together for dinner at El Arroyo. They'll have the address up on the screen shortly, and we'll post the telephone number to call in as well. Upcoming events: the Texas Free Thought Convention is coming up in October. The ACA Bat Cruise is also coming up October 1st, I believe it is. And you can find out more information at the ACA website about our events. That's www.atheist-community.org for information about happy hour, blood drives, street cleanups, the 101,000 other things we do. And while you won't find information on the website yet, we now have a building, which we're going to save all of the fancy announcement stuff until we're ready for like a grand opening. Come down and, you know, let your godless flag fly. But we went ahead and closed on a building. There's going to be some renovation work. We are going to set up part of it as a studio primarily for the nonprofits, so that if I'm out of town, they can still do a show. But on the off chance that we lose the public access TV studio, we are going to be able to continue doing the show, hopefully without too much hassle, from the new building. And it'll be the ACA library loaded with books and prepared for all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, we maybe won't have as many preemptions. Like next week, we are not going to have a show because of some scheduling problems here. And these sorts of problems should go away once we have our own studio.
Yeah, hopefully one of the scheduling problems for next week is that they're coming in to fix the air conditioning. Yeah. I'm pretty sure Don and I are going to look like we've gone swimming by the time the show's over with.
Wilting here.
Not completely sure. We apparently don't have our guest on the line yet, so, and I don't want to start on your topic just to have it derailed. So why don't we take a call, since these people didn't listen to me when I said they could hang up and call back later.
Let's reward them.
And we'll reward them by giving them a minute of time or so. Vaughn in Houston, how are you?
Oh, man, I only get a minute.
If that. Now, go ahead.
Darn it. Maybe I should just trash talk for 30 seconds.
If you think you can make it 30 seconds, I got a quick finger.
Give us something.
Sure, go ahead.
You got a question?
Sorry, I couldn't hear you, but I was actually going to talk about a few different misconceptions about Christianity, but that takes a few minutes, so honestly, you might just be better off by cutting me off.
Well, give us 1 point. I mean, because it's better than giving us 12 anyway, because that just muddles the conversation, makes it difficult to address anything. So, I mean, if there's like 1 point.
I would say that in general, a lot of atheists believe that evolution presupposes atheism and it's incompatible with Christianity.
Yeah, we don't think that.
Yeah, well, no, I realize y'all don't. I've heard that out of y'all's mouth personally.
To be fair, yeah, actually, I do to some extent. I mean, it just depends. I realize that there are plenty of Christians out there who accept evolution. I just don't think they have any rational basis for reconciling evolution with their actual religious beliefs. But the thing is, when you can turn your religion into anything you want it to be, you can make an excuse for anything. So while there are plenty of fairly rational, science-minded Christians out there who accept evolution and think that maybe their God just tinkered, and they're fine with millions of years and reading Genesis as, you know, allegory or things like that, I don't think that they're being very honest representatives of what Christianity really, by and large, is.
So you would define, you would define Christianity as not being compatible with evolution then?
Well, there's 1,000 different definitions of Christianity, but I would say in the traditional sense, in the Orthodox sense, in any sense that's really meaningful, yeah, I think they're completely incompatible because they simultaneously believe, basically what they've done is they've said, okay, now we're okay with the idea that Genesis isn't literal, so maybe it's a day-age thing and we really can have millions and billions of years, or maybe evolution happened but God tinkered along the way, and what they're really doing is weakening, if it's possible, their religious beliefs, which I think are already fairly weak, but they're also weakening the science because evolution doesn't have any room for it, for some being to come in and tinker. There's no intent, no design, and no need to even posit any such interaction.
Well, wait a minute here. There's another issue in the sense that, the Genesis story has the fall of man, right? And if there was no Adam and Eve and there was no fall, the whole reason for Jesus' existence is moot.
Yeah,
Jesus
why
has no purpose whatsoever.
And that's why I don't think they're on very good theological grounds.
I'm just trying to decide who to address here first. I'll go ahead and say to Matt, you're saying evolution doesn't really have need for, a deity. And in general, honestly, I would agree with that. But evolution assumes that there is a mutating replicator. And evolution, it explains the origin of the species and the origin of life, but it does not.
No.
It does not explain. It does not explain the actual origins of the universe.
Actually, evolution doesn't explain the origin of life either. It explains the diversity of life. The origin of life is another issue. But you can't fault evolution for not explaining the origin of the universe. That's like, faulting a ruler for not measuring, light years.
No, I think you misunderstand. I'm not faulting evolution and saying that it comes up short. I'm simply saying that.
Hence the ruler light years analogy, but it's not supposed to do what you're objecting to the fact that it doesn't do.
I agree with you. I'm not saying that it's supposed to explain that.
Sure. So, okay, a souffle recipe doesn't address the origins of the universe either, but I don't feel it's relevant to mention that.
Well, it's sort of like you imply that because evolution does not require a deity, then we do not require a deity because evolution has no need for God.
Yeah.
But I said, but that's completely faulty reasoning because if there's still other things that are left unexplained, like the origin of the universe.
Well, it invalidates the biblical stories, though.
The things that are left unexplained are unexplained. You don't all of a sudden get to say that, okay, you've eliminated the need for a God on this question, but on this question where we don't yet have a complete answer, I'm going to go ahead and think it's justifiable to insert a God in there. That's asinine because a God has no explanatory power. We tend to explain things in terms of things that we understand. This is absolutely an argument from ignorance. It is a bald assertion that because we don't have a complete understanding of subject X, that it is somehow justifiable for me to appeal to magic and superstition, and it's not justified at all.
No, I think if you go back to what I'm saying, that is not my point at all. I'm not trying to say that God might exist simply because we don't have an origin of the universe. because that would be God of the gaps. That would be arguing the ignorance.
So instead, are
I'm
you
well
just
acquainted with it.
shifting the burden of proof to say that because we haven't disproved God, a God might exist? Because that's
No.
Okay. So why is it you believe a God exists?
Why do I believe that God exists?
Sure.
All right, I believe because of inductive reasoning in general, and because I think the world has sort of a semiotic appeal that I think it obviously has meaning. And I believe that in general there are a few good deductive arguments out there that make it somewhat probable that there could be a deity. So I just choose to believe in a deity.
So, because you can't find any deductive arguments that make it probable, you simply choose to believe so because you think that it agrees with the meaning that you see in the universe.
No, I'm not saying that those are two separate things. I'm saying those are multiple reasons that go together to me.
Yeah, but one of mine was actually a huge negative, and the other one was just a logical fallacy. So, but on that note, our guest is actually waiting on the phone. I don't want to keep him waiting much longer. So, if there's time this show, great. If not, try again in 2 weeks, or email TV to Atheist Community. Maybe we can talk about this more.
Okie dokie.
Thank you for your call.
Sure. All right. Without any further ado, Dr. Paul, are you there?
I'm not a doctor. Don't accuse me of that.
I'm sorry.
I got a high school diploma.
I'm sorry. I just want to kind of, I don't know, elevate you a little bit because we've relied so much on your research in the past. For those who aren't aware, there's a really good paper that we've referenced a gazillion times that Gregory Paul wrote, basically comparing societal health to religiosity and showing a negative correlation between the two. And we've pointed it out many, many times and used it for a number of things, not just explaining the meat of the actual study, but the difference between correlation and causation and making sure that people's arguments are clear. I had the good fortune to actually meet Greg when I was up at UMBC for a debate last October, I think it was. And he's called in once before, but today you want to call in and enlighten us a little on a new paper. So why don't you give us kind of a heads up on that?
Yeah, this paper actually is dates from about the same time I did the evolutionary psychology paper a couple of years ago. It isn't that new. But, about not being a doctor, one of the cool things about me is I don't have a doctorate and I'm doing this advanced research. Mm-hmm. And I sent this paper out to the leading theologians, asking for comment, and nobody's replied to it because they can't come up with a good one. And also the previous caller, that actually set us up fairly well from what we're talking about.
Cool.
The basic thing is that, and by the way, I think that science can tell us a lot about things that people haven't really looked at, including issues of morality. Mm-hmm. And what the previous caller was doing was making a major mistake. And atheists do this too. And the basic mistake is the argument is often about does God exist or not. And I don't think that can be entirely answered. You can't entirely disprove that ghosts are haunting the house on the corner. But you can probably show it's not true. But likewise, I don't think you can entirely disprove the existence of a God or multiple gods. What you can do is test the morality of any god. And what can be done, and what I did in this paper, it's in Philosophy and Theology. You can access the text at my website, which is www.gspscienceofreligion.com. Is I've shown there's no way that a benign, loving Christian deity can exist. And I've done that by looking at the most tragic thing that's happened that people have really not been paying attention to, what I call the holocaust of the children.
Okay. I managed to get through a good chunk of the paper, and I don't know how many people are actually familiar with. I had a really interesting conversation, and let me see if this sets you up at all, where we had invited a minister on the show. Russell had him on, ostensibly to talk about the problem of evil, otherwise known as theodicy. But when he was on here, he absolutely refused to address the problem of evil at all and spent a lot of time talking about how cool he was and what nice things he was doing. It was as if he didn't understand the problem of evil at all. And in an email a few weeks ago, somebody, another Christian, wrote in to say that they thought he did a wonderful job of addressing the problem of evil. And as I tried to get them to explain exactly how he addressed the problem of evil at all, this individual's understanding was that the problem of evil was nothing more than evil exists in the world and Christianity doesn't have a good enough explanation for that, and thought that atheism had some dog in that fight as well, that we don't have a good explanation for why there's evil, which is not only false, but it steps outside the bounds of this. So if you want, I figure you can go through a little bit of the research you did and some of the numbers that I think are incredibly eye-opening.
Yeah, and it's kind of scary how people don't know some basic items, statistical items, and everybody should know. One of which, off the top, is how many people have been born so far. And a lot of people, I've heard, even William Dembski, who's supposed to be a great mathematician, the intelligent designer, said 10 billion people born so far. It's the number of people born in the 20th century alone. There's a guy named Carl Haber who did a classic study on population today. It's about 100 billion people so far. It's a huge number.
Wow. I'm surprised even.
No, there were like 300 million people alive during the Roman Empire. They lasted 20 years. The turnover rate was tremendous. So that century alone, 1 billion people. Just adds up over the last 10,000 years since agriculture came in. So it's about 100 billion. Now, there's another frightening number that people haven't looked at. And I'm actually the first person to do this really simple calculation. I don't know why I'm the first person to do it. But it's how many people who've been born have died as kids.
Yeah.
And that's not hard to figure out. The British did demographic work in India in the late 1800s and the European studies too. Historically, the death rate of kids has been 50%.
Wow.
50%.
Yeah, shocking.
So we're talking 50 billion dead kids so far. And that's the dead children after born. Pre-birth mortality rates may be up to 3/4 historically because the human reproductive system is so crappy. And you're talking then about the preborn who've died, are at least 100 billion, maybe 300 billion. Huge numbers.
Yeah.
Now, the scale of this is immense, and it's being ignored. And the implications are all over the map, not only for whether there's a good God or not, but it has crazy implications for who's in heaven and not, and so on. But anyway, the main thing about the children who've died is that most of them have died from diseases.
Sure.
And I want to stand back and just take a look at this a second. What's the basic premise of Christianity? There's one God, and also Islam, Christianity and Islam. There's one God who created the entire universe, this huge, vast thing. Well, where does this God stick us on? This tiny little speck of dust that's a death trap, loaded with so many diseases that it has killed off 50 billion children. And that's
but isn't the universe made to support life?
Pardon?
Isn't the universe made to support life?
This is we're not going to have time to go into this today, but this really challenges some basic things about, this concept that the universe is primed for life. It was just a little bit different, there wouldn't be life in it. Well, almost all the universe is deadly to life. You can't breathe in a vacuum. But the Earth itself, the one place, is a kid killer.
Yeah.
So, and for example, malaria alone has probably killed about 20 million kids.
Mm-hmm. It's a pretty awful disease. It's been with us a long time, too.
Yeah, well, it's a terrible tragedy. So this is the worst thing that's happened. And people tend to focus, like when there's the tsunamis hit Japan or the Indonesian one, people start talking about, is there a good God? Or there's the Jewish Holocaust. But these are pedantic things. This is the really big thing. And I went through the theist literature, all of it, and the Polkinghorne, the Hott, Hicks, and they don't breathe a word about this. They have sub-chapters about suffering of animals. They do not mention the problem of the children, and I'm going to tell you why. The basic argument for theodicy these days is the reason that bad things happen is God doesn't want to control everything. God wants us all to make a free will choice whether to be with Him in heaven or not.
Right.
Plus, we need to perfect ourselves before we get there. And that's something a lot of Christians don't really understand, is that there cannot be anything imperfect in heaven ever. It's perfect. Once you're in there, you're going to be perfect forever. You have to be ready for that. So you have to try and prepare and become an adult, become mature enough to make this decision. And I've mentioned the 50 billion figure to people, and they start bringing this up, and I say, well, wait a second. What age do you have to have free will? You got to get at least into your teens somewhere, something like that, or 20s.
Well, there's this age of reason concept, right?
Yeah.
Usually around 8 or so is what I've heard.
Well, that's kind of ridiculous to me, but still, whatever it is, half the people born basically die before they get to that age.
Yeah.
God doesn't give a damn about free will for humans. This is a completely bogus argument. Theodicy is wrecked. There is nothing to it. It is completely empty and it's stupid.
Yeah, every one of the responses that I've ever heard to the problem of evil they seem, I can freely admit, as somebody who is a Christian for 25 plus years, they are like anything else within the theology. They are convincing to those who already believe, and they are utterly vapid when anybody looks beyond that. And so when we talk about, well, there's been a number of proposed solutions to the problem of evil, the free will one being probably the most popular, and especially in the modern era. But other issues where, they simply just blamed humans, all the diseases and things are our fault from the fall, which sets up another argument about the immorality of a God who designs a system like this. But what I like about what you've done here is that, okay, so if your go-to argument is now going to be free will, can you please reconcile that with the idea?
It's impossible. It can't be done. Yeah. This is why I think I have heard nothing about this. I've gotten a fair amount of response about my sociological work and that sort of thing, but this is being ignored. It's such a deep problem.
Yeah, there's a number of things we've talked about over the years, especially like when we've had Vic Stinger and stuff on here, who I think does a really good job of kind of going through the possible gods and basically destroying any possibility that they exist. And like with the first caller, when I was explaining that if you don't have an answer, that doesn't mean that you're justified in positing this. But for people who already believe, they have in their head some sort of model of the way the universe is and how a God relates to that. And in every case, when you drill down to the specifics of what they believe and compare them to the observations of the universe, it crumbles. And when we're talking about the case that you're raising particularly, where half of the people who have ever lived have died before they reach any sort of, age of reason or responsibility, well, okay, that destroys the free will response. So exactly what could you possibly be left with? We've talked before about the fact that this God, in every incarnation, especially with Christianity, is a little like a Wile E. Coyote was Tracy Harris's example, where he goes through all these elaborate measures, in creating this vast universe in order to put people on there when they're purportedly his special creation. And then even when you get down to that, the universe still doesn't work in a way that makes any kind of sense. So is their God just incompetent or inept? I mean, certainly there's no sort of perfection in that.
Well, we humans, as primitive as we are, we brought childhood mortality rates down to a few percent. We can do it. So this idea that there's a God that's incompetent, the incompetence would be unbelievable. It's not an acceptable argument.
Yeah.
So even that doesn't work. What I'm thinking we should start doing is really emphasizing this, and I think it should become common knowledge among atheists that there are 50 billion dead children so far. I mean, most still don't know this, that there have been probably a couple 100 billion or more preborn who've died, and really start throwing this at them and at theists, and do it in a very strong way. I'm starting to challenge Christians directly, saying when they start talking about their God and their loving God, I say you're worshiping. Well, I wish I was on Real Time with Bill Maher when Ann Coulter was on.
Yeah.
Did you see that? When she arched her back up and said, "I believe in God," nobody on that panel knew what to say. I would have crushed her right there. I would have said, "You're kissing the ass of a God who slaughtered 50 billion children so far for your own self-aggrandizement to get into heaven for eternity. This is completely base and morally degraded. How could you be so sick and twisted?" And we need to start doing this to Christians. I'm not one of those people who believes in being polite to Christians. I mean, you don't want to be rude in terms of saying nasty things to them egregiously, but confront them directly. And I'm starting to do this, and they get the deer in the headlights look.
Yeah, because you're confronting an issue. You're not necessarily confronting them. The hope is, of course, that they'll eventually see. I've used the mafia boss analogy before, which I think aptly fits the God of the Bible in almost any form you want to put him into. But in this case, when we're talking about this, I mean, this is a useful challenge for a lot of things. Maybe August 6th, when Governor Perry is down there having his prayer rally along with the American Family Association hate group, it might be worthwhile to ask them, among the problems that he thinks he's incompetent to solve and needs to appeal to Jesus for, is he thinking about doing anything for the 50 billion who have died.
How do we do that? I mean, I'd like to know. I mean, it's an interesting thing to do.
I don't know, because I can't get him to answer questions when I'm standing next to him on the walkway of the Capitol. He just kind of runs away from me, and I've invited him on the show. So I'm planning on possibly going out there and standing out alongside, ironically, the Westboro Baptist Church, who are also protesting his event, which I think just makes this even funnier.
Get some signs. Get signs literally and put 50 billion children on it so far. I'm not kidding. Why don't we start doing that?
Yeah.
And there's a kind of an irony here, because coming from the background and knowing so many Christians, I can easily throw the hat back on and say that the most common response I would expect to this, after you get them to the point where they can't come up with anything, they can no longer defend it without sacrificing their own integrity, is they'll do something that still sacrifices their integrity but hides it, and that is that they will just trust that God has taken care of those 50 billion in His wisdom, and that they have been spirited off to heaven.
This is the cool thing. Now, think about this. I mean, there are different alternatives for what happened to the souls of children. And also, I'm starting to ask that. What happens to the souls of little children when they die? And in strict Christian doctrine, they go to hell because they didn't accept the grace of Christ.
That's right. They're born with original sin, and
they're imperfect. You have to be perfect when you get to heaven. So they're being sent to hell. But very few Christians believe that. And of course, the Catholic Church tried to get around this for a while with limbo. But that didn't work, because when more modern parents heard they were going to be with their children for eternity, they got mad. So the Catholic Church has abandoned that. So basically, I think most Christians are now going for kids to go straight to heaven, which means that since
abortion's awesome then, right?
Pardon?
Abortion's awesome then. They go straight to heaven.
The other thing is you can't use God as an argument against abortion and murder, because God doesn't care about this. God designed the human reproductive system so badly it kills off most conceptions and so on. But assuming that that the conceptions have souls that go to hell, they die prematurely, that means the vast majority of happened to children who never went through a test on Earth, never did this free will thing or improved themselves. Again, this just exposes this thing as a sad, pathetic joke of an invention that people concocted and not thought through the consequences.
Yeah. And I will mildly disagree with you on one point. This idea of perfection, I would recommend avoiding, because in every in the versions of Christianity that I grew up with and am familiar with, it's not that you need to be perfect in order to get to heaven. It's that when you get there, God makes you perfect, which I actually think is a much stronger point to raise, because there's this idea that after, for example, pick random Christian, after they've died, they get to go to heaven. And my argument is that in much the same way that we have no good reason to think there's a soul, and plenty of good reason to think there's not anything remotely like a soul. If you get to heaven and you are perfect, and you are made perfect, and you are changed, whatever is in heaven isn't you anymore. And I think that's an important point to hit.
Well, the reason I said that was because that's what some of the theodists say.
Yeah.
I picked that up. So, there was probably disagreement here, but I'm not sure what to think. We'd have to mull that over some more.
Yeah. There's for every Christian, there's almost a different answer to this issue.
Well, of course.
Or at least there's one for every theologian who's managed to teach the various Christians, because evidently many of them haven't bothered to think about these issues for themselves. I found, during the course of my falling away from religion, I would read through the Bible, and of course I would ask God for guidance on this, and when no guidance came, I was left with purportedly the brain that God gave me to think it through, and it became rather obvious rather quickly that this was just absurd, if not outright immoral. And if you put together an entire system, which I think you've done kind of nicely here, where if you think about it from the perspective of this God being, and he has this goal of creating a universe for a particular race, species, whatever, that he's going to mold and guide to eventually join him in heaven. He's created a system that is not only grossly deadly in an immoral sense,
to the kids,
but also one that's just absurd at its face. Because even if you assumed that this God somehow spirited away the 50 billion and just gave them like a free pass to heaven,
what was the rest of us?
What was the point of putting them through those years of torture and the agonizing death in the first place? And for that matter, what's the point of putting anybody through it?
Exactly.
If he's all wise and knows everything that's going to happen, why not just skip to the end, put the people that he wants to have around him up in heaven with him, and get rid of the rest from the get-go without going through all the motions? I mean, this is.
You want to hear back from the theologians about this. Oh, another quick point is that God gave kids bad immune systems. He didn't even care about kids enough to give them decent immune systems to fight the diseases that he created.
Even worse, he gave them immune systems that are dependent on their mother, so if their mother's a batshit crazy anti-vaxxer, they're screwed. I can't begin to beat them up enough over that. But so thanks for leading into another good point.
Yeah.
On that note, Greg, I appreciate the call, and we've got like all the lines completely full, so I got to let you go today. Hopefully we'll get you back on. Hopefully we'll get you in Austin to actually talk some about this at some point.
Okay.
All right. Thanks much.
Take it easy.
Thank you for your work, Paul.
Bye.
Or Greg. Greg.
So yeah, good stuff to look around for. You can just do a Google search for Gregory S. Paul, and you'll find not only the journal study that we've talked about before, but this new paper. Lots of things to look into there, and plenty to think about, because one of the things, like at the end there, I managed to disagree with him on one little fine point, but that's good.
Mm-hmm. It's healthy.
Because, first of all, there's no easy answer to any of this, because there's 1,000 different denominations of Christians with, countless people who all have their own ideas. And I think it just shows another absurdity in this proposed plan of a wise God, when every individual sitting out there in the pew can have their own idea about this, and they are all completely convinced that they are the ones who have been chosen to go on and live forever in a heaven.
It's a great mind game,
yeah.
isn't it? Yeah.
It's like the best self-gratifying. It's like better than masturbation to sit there and think that you are, I'm so special. Thank you for treating me so special. And I know that those, my terrible neighbors next door are going straight to hell because they're gay or Muslim or something like that. Look how much cooler my life is. And really, I think something that we haven't talked about enough that we really should is that with a handful of exceptions, and usually those exceptions are people who are having a really difficult time getting over religious indoctrination. Every atheist I've met who was previously religious has had nothing but positive things to say about how much more improved their life is. Not necessarily how much better their life is with regard to other people, because they are often ostracized and abused, fired, kicked out of their houses, things like that. But as far as how they feel about themselves, about their integrity, about their moral compass, about their ability to look around the world and in wonder and explore without the nagging guilt that is imposed by religion, I think that's a message that has to get out there, so that the people who are currently trapped in fear can step out away from that. And we need to build communities around so that they have a place to go during that transition process, and then be the next people to help after that.
Yeah.
We got like 27 minutes left.
Why don't we go out with calls?
You want to do calls?
That way, we're not kind of fighting with two topics and pushing out the callers, because I know a lot of our audience likes the calls. So
yeah,
I'll just defer and I'll take my topic next time.
Cool. And if what we may do is, rather than have you wait until the next time you're on, which delays all your topics once, there may be a week coming up where I'll need a sub. And you can just sub in and do it then.
Awesome.
We'll see. We'll figure out the schedule afterwards. So we'll go ahead and take calls for however much time we got left. We got William in Bolivia, North Carolina. Again, right?
Yeah, again.
Sure.
Actually didn't mean to call, but then I saw something in the newspaper that just hurt my head so bad I had to. Have you ever heard of the Society of St. Pius X?
St. Pius X. No, I haven't.
No.
No, well, they've recently done a protest, and I'm just going to read you the headline.
Okay.
Small group of Catholics convinced Galileo was wrong after all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's a few people running around who still think the Earth's flat, and who think that homeopathy, that water has memory. People are going to be wrong about all kinds of things, no matter how many times they're proven wrong.
Well, I mean, I guess just the fact that people are giving money to something this wrong is what hurts my head so bad.
Yeah. The good news, I think, and I'm agreeing with and kind of stealing and modifying something PZ has said, is that I look forward to the day, like today we pick up that headline about people, a small group of Catholics who think that Galileo was wrong, and we chuckle because they're crazy and they have no impact on anything.
I'm not chuckling. I'm sorry, y'all might be, but maybe I'll chuckle later. I'm just hot.
There's nothing to get hot about.
Well, there's a lot of issues like that come up that are maddening, right? And
right.
You're just touching the tip of the iceberg.
I mean, obviously, it's worth getting upset if they are teaching children and basically ruining, lives and intellect for the future. But the thing that I kind of look forward to is the fact that I can read that and chuckle because I realize this is an incredibly small minority that has no impact on anything. And I look forward to the day when I chuckle at the same headlines when they read, small group of people still believe in a God or
Darwin was wrong or something.
Anything along those lines.
Humor is a good coping mechanism if you can take advantage of it.
Excuse me?
Humor is a good coping mechanism with these situations like this. If you can find a way to laugh, you'll live longer.
Yeah,
and you'll have the last laugh.
Good point.
Much bigger fish to fry. If I worried about every little crazy person, my life would be miserable.
But we agree that they're crazy. So.
But thanks a lot for calling in, William. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me on again.
Sure. Good day.
All right.
All right. Hey, look, we have a caller from Austin, Texas. I don't know where this is.
Wow.
Bob, can you tell us where Austin is?
What do you mean?
Well, we tend to not get any calls from the Austin area because we broadcast over the internet. So you're like the first caller that's from Austin in I don't know how long. So how you doing?
Well, I'm doing good. I've actually got a proof for God. Do you know who Chris Langan is?
I don't.
No, but that name sounds familiar.
Yeah, well, he has a proof for God, and he's a certified genius. He has an IQ of 210. It's higher than Einstein.
Okay. Sounds like an argument from authority, but keep going.
Well, I just wanted to introduce it to you, just so you know that it's not some crazy guy.
Well, it doesn't. See, that's the point that I kind of made last week by dressing up in drag, is that the validity of an argument isn't impacted in any way by who makes it. So there are plenty of people who are brilliant in a number of areas, who are stupid in other areas or just incorrect in other areas. So
yeah, I understand. Just see the argument for yourself. It's called, well, just search his name on Wikipedia and YouTube and you can find it. And he's proven it. So I kind of wonder why you guys haven't talked about that one yet. Maybe you're scared to address that one.
I can tell you why. Because if any physicist or mathematician actually proved God, it would be front page news around the world and none of us would have to bother wasting any time discussing it. Instead, what you're probably talking about is one of many crackpot theories coming from some otherwise brilliant people that has been largely discredited by their peers.
Now,
so,
you got to remember, sometimes people are ahead of the times.
Yeah, and sometimes they're not. And the time to believe them is when you've actually demonstrated that they're right.
All right.
Well, we'd be happy to look at it. So we'll look at it. So
well, now you can't say you don't know about it. You can't use that excuse anymore because I told you about it.
Well, I don't even know what it is exactly.
Well, actually, I can still use that excuse as long as I don't actually go look at it. But I will go look at it. And it may be that I've seen this before and dismissed it because if it's one intelligent person making an argument and it hasn't been peer-reviewed or supported by anybody, or if it's been discredited by others, then I don't need to waste any more time on it now, do I?
So maybe you could, Bob, maybe you could give us a 1 or 2 sentence version of what it's about.
Well, I'll just let you take a look at it, but he proves from quantum physics and math and philosophy and logic that the universe is like a mind, and the question, whose mind? Well, that's God's mind.
Yeah. There isn't anything in math that equals mind or God's mind. There isn't anything in physics that equals mind or God's mind. And there isn't anything in quantum physics that equals mind or God's mind. So,
no, you don't know that yet.
So, without being able to introduce those variables, I think he's a nut. But I'll look it up.
Look it up because he says this argument is as irrefutable as 2 + 2 = 4, he says.
Well,
okay. Okay.
Lots of people say things. I would highly recommend that you stop depending on somebody asserting very strongly that something is true and actually dig around and look beyond it, because those mathematical disciplines don't have within them the concepts of minds, which means at best he's making an argument by analogy, which doesn't prove anything.
Or misapplying the
And
science.
I'm sorry, because people will call in to say, well, Einstein believed in a God. Well, yeah, he believed in, the Spinoza's God, the law of the universe thing, as a God as a metaphor type thing. And whenever they raise this, they raise it as if, well, since you don't believe in a God, do you think you're smarter than Einstein?
No, I'm not saying he believes in it. I'm saying he's got an argument for it with mathematics.
Okay.
If he's got an argument that he says is irrefutable and he doesn't believe it, then he's even crazier than I thought.
Okay.
But thanks.
Tell me the guy's name again, real quick.
Chris Langan, Langan.
Okay.
And just one other thing before I go, I'll just take this off there. What makes you think that God is supposed to be moral? The last call you were whining about 50 billion children dead. Well, what makes you think in the Bible that he's supposed to save people?
I don't, okay, wow. In that particular case, we're talking about a particular definition of God where God is predefined to be moral. Christians think their God is moral, that they think he is the perfectly moral being
The author
in the
of
universe.
human morality,
I don't
right?
think that thing exists. I don't think that a God necessarily needs to be moral. I think that it's just as likely if a God is out there that it is immoral or amoral or no more moral than anybody else. I'm not doing the defining here. This is the traditional philosophical problem of evil, otherwise known as theodicy, which depends on a specific definition of a God. We weren't just sitting around whining about how immoral a God is. We were talking about a specific philosophical argument that predefines God to be moral.
Yeah, well, I don't think God owes us anything. I think we betrayed him, and he's getting his revenge on us.
I'm sorry that you have been convinced of something so absurd that you are willing to shrug off your own self-worth for what can only be described as monstrous. Clearly the God you believe in is not morally good.
If you had children and they betrayed you and say they slapped you in the face...
Sure, would I throw them in the basement and torture them forever? No, because that's immoral and wrong.
What do you mean? If they're your children, you made them, they're supposed to love you.
Do you think it would be okay for you to throw your children in the basement and torture them for the rest of their lives because they don't love you and because they betrayed you?
This is by
analogy to the Christian God. Do you think that's morally correct?
Well,
Matt's making an analogy to the Christian God.
Think about it some more, Bob. We'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for calling, Bob.
Gabe in Hemet, California. How are you?
Hello?
Hello. Is this Gabe?
Hi, how are you guys?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. Thank God I finally got through.
You're welcome.
Tech technology.
Well, no, I don't have too much time, so if I get the choice.
Okay. All right, so what do you got for us today?
Well, there's a part of me that's atheist, and there's another that believes in God, you know?
Well, yeah, a lot of folks have kind of these dual beliefs that don't quite add up together, and hopefully that's causing you a little discomfort.
Are you a split brain patient? Because that's the only case I know of where that's sound.
No, I can understand what he's saying.
I do understand kind of colloquially what you're talking about, but go ahead.
I've been watching your guys' show for a while, and that's been, having me to think for a long time now.
Cool.
But, one question is, so you guys don't believe in exorcism, right?
Correct.
No.
Well, I mean, I believe that people engage in a process that they call exorcism, but I don't think that there's anything supernatural about it.
Yeah, I think
So
it's
you
like
guys believe
theater.
I'm sorry?
I said I think it's like theater.
Oh. So you guys don't believe in ghosts, spirits, demons, or negative energy, right?
Nope. I don't know if the
Negative energy as in electrons or as in some kind of woo stuff?
No, like, controlling over a mind or a body or any of that.
Sure, no.
So technically atheism is about God claims, but most atheists are also skeptics, and so all of these things that you bring up, the evidence is either non-existent or very weak for these sorts of things, and most folks that I associate with or in this group would claim that they're not supported by evidence, and therefore we shouldn't believe in them.
Yep.
So, would you guys personally engage or experiment with a Ouija board?
I've messed with a Ouija board before.
Really?
Sure. It's an interesting demonstration of the ideomotor reflex.
Huh. Okay, well,
So you can fake yourself out by controlling it without sort of realizing you're controlling it, and that's what he's talking about. And so, you know, people read into it much more than deserves to be read into it.
Yeah, do a Google search for idiomotor response or idiomotor reflex. It's one of those things along the lines of the placebo effect that we're still learning about, but there's no reason to suppose that there's anything supernatural going on.
It's just like your hand moving a little bit or something.
Yeah, it would be fair. I mean, I'm not an expert, and this is something that I'll stay away from, but there's a lot of things like the idiomotor response, hypnosis, other things like that, that really, when you look at it at the nuts and bolts, it's kind of play acting between a couple people. In the case of the Ouija board, you really are moving it, even if you're not always consciously aware that that's what's going on. In the case of hypnosis, you have an actor and someone giving them permission to do things with a way out and an excuse. So
Divining is another one.
yeah, the same thing with divining rods and things like that. There's lots of things that, because we don't know everything about everything, look really mysterious and spooky and weird. But we still don't, even if we had no explanation for this, it doesn't make supernatural explanations at all plausible. In order for an explanation to be plausible, you have to be able to kind of measure it and make sure that it's real in order to even determine how probable it is. So
Yeah.
all of those just become big arguments from ignorance. I don't know how it works, but my aunt's cousin swears that she talks to spirits when she's on the Ouija board. So that seems pretty plausible to me. No, that's just wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And another point is that I see religion as a way to control people, you know?
I certainly see it used that way quite often.
It's easier to tell little Johnny not to steal a cookie from a cookie jar saying that God's watching you instead of mom is watching you.
Yes.
That's right.
Because you're being watched by something you cannot see or feel.
Yes.
And you make more money as a minister if you keep your flock giving donations.
Yeah, and there's a huge problem with using religion as a shortcut, even if your intent is to do good. I get asked quite a lot because I've discussed the superiority of secular morality. I had an email this week talking about, are you opposed to, for example, religion when it's used to free someone from an addiction? And my answer is yes, of course I'm still opposed to it. I'm very happy that someone is now free of an addiction or has had a bad behavior corrected. But the problem is, if the foundation upon which that change in behavior if the foundation for that change is false, then when they go and discover that this is false, you have now knocked the knees out from underneath them. You've cut them
Toppled
up.
the house of
We
cards,
need
right.
to build people up and encourage changes for sound reasons so that won't happen. So that when the person who's gone to AA, who's been convinced that they are helpless to solve their problem and need to appeal to a higher authority, suddenly finds out that all these appeals to higher authority are nonsense, they don't immediately go back and hit the bottle out of despair. Instead, we need to build up people to recognize what we do and don't understand about addictions, what we do and don't understand about people's ability to change behavior. We need to encourage people to socialize and interact with others and support each other, because you can't necessarily do everything for yourself. Some people can. Some people can, I can quit smoking tomorrow, no problem at all, and others will never be able to do anything like that. I've spent quite a bit of time over the past few weeks watching shows like Hoarders. Mm-hmm. Where once upon a time I would have just looked at the individuals on Hoarders and God. You guys are just filthy, disgusting people. And now that we're starting to learn a little bit more about mental issues, especially things that are conditions that the person isn't necessarily responsible for, we can actually work to change behaviors like that and help people live happier, productive lives across the board. And you don't always have to look at somebody and go, oh, you're just a disgusting pig. There are serious psychological issues that are behind a lot of that hoarding. And that goes for everything. So it's a big world.
What I think is that your mind is so powerful. If I believe in a tooth fairy very, very strongly as my faith, I might even see it when I'm sleeping. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Yeah, you can play mind games with yourself and psych yourself out, and it may not be the most healthy way of going forward for just this reason, that it's sort of based on a false premise, or it's not sound.
Yeah, any untruth is potentially dangerous, and untruths, when they're packaged up with an air of authority, as if they are truths that have been revealed from outside, those are particularly dangerous. And it's the reason why, as a skeptic, I'm not only an atheist, but I am strongly opposed to religion and feel that it's the biggest threat out there. We talked a little bit about it on Nonprofits yesterday, about skeptics addressing the big elephant in the room instead of protecting it. But on that note, Gabe, I got to let you go. I appreciate the call.
All right, then. Thank you so much, guys. You guys have a good day.
Thanks.
Thanks.
We have like 7 minutes or so left in the show. I haven't mentioned since the show started that after the show's over, we go to dinner at El Arroyo. They'll put the address back up. Any atheist or atheist-friendly person is welcome to join us at that or any of our other events. The ACA has weekly meetings at Romeo's that I forgot to mention, but also a lecture series the first Sunday of the month at the Austin History Center. All the information is available at www.atheist-community.org. There's a calendar of events up there. Don works really hard to try to keep the calendar up to date, and I work really hard to screw up that calendar without telling him about it at every opportunity. So
We try. We try to keep it up to date.
if the calendar's broken, it's my fault. If it works, he gets the credit. I don't mind. It's mostly true. We've got Mark in Arkansas. How are you?
Hey, doing great. Appreciate y'all's program. I have a lot of respect for what you do
Thanks.
and everything you, or at least the way that you engage Christianity. The reason I was calling is I have a little bit of a problem with the way you answered the first caller today.
Mm-hmm.
And in my opinion, I think that evolution, if the theory of evolution is true, that is, if we're supposed to believe that natural selection and chance is the explanation for all life on Earth, then I think evolution has to, or at least science has to provide some sort of an explanation for how did matter give rise to life, and into vegetative life,
And
and
there,
in
yeah,
life.
yeah, I agree.
Sure.
I agree. And there are scientists working on that question. It's called abiogenesis, and there is a very active set of work going on. In fact, I think Harvard has even decided to choose it as one of the topics that they want to, as a university, invest some time and energy in. This is sort of an important philosophical question, right? Where did life come from? A lot of folks wonder that and want to know where it came from. One of the challenges, I think, is, and there has been a lot of progress in that area, by the way. There's the Miller-Urey experiment, there's the RNA world hypothesis, and these sorts of things. And
John Oro has done a lot. Wikipedia's actually got a decent article on abiogenesis with links to the different studies. And it's definitely a question that has to be raised. But not having an explanation for the origins of life means we don't have an explanation. So the religious propositions aren't true until debunked. They're not true until they're proven to be true. So what I would think would be interesting was if for the Christians out there who accept evolution but are a little frustrated by the lack of good explanations for the origins of life, especially with the competing scientific theories, which don't take into account of God, I would like to see those Christians, for example, the intelligent design movement, maybe go out and develop some theories of their own and test that might be consistent with their belief in a God.
Yeah, well, and I think there are some. If you're looking at kind of a naturalistic explanation of the origin of life, some assumptions that I think are in place that don't necessarily fit with the scientific data that we have available.
Like what?
And I think there are. What?
Can you? I'm not trying to expect you to have every example memorized.
but-
I just
no,
want to
I
know
do.
if you had an example.
Yeah, I mean, like chemical evidence for the primordial soup is supposedly supposed to be in place in the early when the Earth. And there's really no geological basis for that. There's nothing that can kind of show conditions that would have to be present for life to begin, at least based on what's been done in laboratory conditions. A couple other things.
Yeah, unfortunately, your phone was breaking up, so I missed several key words in there. If you want to try it again.
Okay.
yeah, I'm not fully understanding your point.
Well, no, I'm saying there's some predictions that are made by naturalistic origin of life process that don't necessarily fit scientific data.
Yeah, and so what doesn't doesn't fit the data?
The chemical and physical conditions that exist on the early Earth, what naturalistic explanations say have to be present with the geological record. There's nothing that shows that those conditions even were close to being present, or that if they were present, that actually support life.
Well,
or the beginning
okay.
of life.
I'll have to say that I think you're just mistaken there, because until we've solved the explanation for exactly how life arose, we don't have the data set that you're saying is refuted. I mean, if we don't know specifically what conditions were required in this particular instance, then we don't have any data that could be in conflict. You see what I'm saying?
Well, that's my point. That's the thing. If we're going to believe that evolution is true, that all of life on Earth is a product of chance and natural selection, then there needs some sort of explanation for how this could have even got started. And from what I'm offering is, I mean, I think that there is a biblical explanation for how this process could happen that actually some of the scientific data, at least better than what the naturalistic explanation offers at this point.
Okay. First of all, there's a biblical explanation, and there's a Quranic explanation, and there's an ancient Indian explanation, and 1,000 others that might explain universal origins. But your claim that that fits the data better, I don't see how you can remotely say that when it necessarily appeals to the supernatural, and you have absolutely no evidence to confirm that that appeal to the supernatural is justified.
Well, from a naturalistic perspective, with dealing with these sort of issues, I don't think it's fair to completely eliminate after rock start.
No. We're not talking about philosophical naturalism, the assertion that the natural is all there is. I'm talking about methodological naturalism, which, if you had any evidence for the supernatural, it would then be rolled into naturalism as something that has been demonstrated to be true. So it doesn't matter what label you want to put on it. You are necessarily appealing to something that has no reason to suppose that it's actually true. And of course, it fits, because it's designed to fit. When you create a panacea, of course it explains things.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Is we're here. We're life is on Earth.
Correct.
That's evidence for a supernatural beginning, because explanations can't provide it.
No, the existence of life on Earth is not confirmation of the supernatural.
No, I'm just saying
it can't
it's
be.
the confirmation of a different model that I think explains things better than what naturalistic origin life models.
Okay, but naturalism doesn't currently explain the origins of life, so you can't say something explains it better. You cannot say that something explains it better.
Okay, well, what would you offer as a more
Okay, this is a big fat argument from ignorance. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Please stop, because we're almost out of time. You cannot say that because we don't have an explanation, that the explanation in the Bible is therefore the best one. It's not. That is, by definition, an argument from ignorance. I got to let you go. I apologize. We're out of time. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. We will not have a show next week due to studio conflicts. We'll be back in 2 weeks. Thanks, everybody who makes the studio happen, even though it's hot as hell. Let's get out of here. Enjoy your week off.
That's right. See y'all at dinner, hopefully.
It's not an argument from ignorance, because I said it wasn't. What? Holy crap, it's out in here.